our featured speaker this morning is Dr. Tommy Butts, who serves as the clinical assistant professor and weed extension weed scientist at Purdue University. Originally, Tommy was scheduled to address the group on weed management. However, recognizing the growing need for clarity and education around the Endangered Species Act, he's adjusted his focus and will address that topic today. Hopefully, this presentation will be especially helpful, and you can help better teach us how we can teach the Endangered Species Act and communicate this information better to farmers and applicators and ag professionals. So with that, Tommy, I'll turn that over to you. Looking forward to this.
Sounds good. Thanks, Marty. So first and foremost, I just want to throw it out there that I don't need to drone on and on for this presentation today. So if any of you that are on, anybody that's actually on the live broadcast here, if you have questions, feel free to raise your virtual Zoom hand so I can see it. If you want to write in the chat, whatever you want to do, feel free to throw out questions and we can have more of a discussion as we're going through this. Like Marty said, I know in our field crops focus group committee, we had a few people that tried to do some of the PARPs already with the new mandatory regulatory topic that is the ESA this year. And I've heard from some other agents and just people in general, retailers and other stuff that are very concerned and confused by the whole Endangered Species Act thing going on. So that's why I wanted to kind of give this presentation today. Is just try and give an overview and maybe simplify it down a little bit so that when y'all are having to do the mandatory regulatory topic, maybe it's a little bit easier to understand, or you can use some of the simplified concepts to help teach it. Because I know the video from the state chemist office gets a little bit in depth fast, and there's just it's a convoluted web of regulations basically. But if you break it down and you just kind of simplify it to like 3 main points, and we talk about it that it's going to be a gradual process. It's not we have to do everything this first year. Then it'll help a little bit, I think. So that's kind of where I want to go with this. So, Marty, I see you just posted a question. How will it be handled when pesticide applications are hired out? What do you mean by that? Like who's liable? Is that your question?
Yeah. So if you're applying the pesticides yourself, I understood, you go to live bulletins too and fulfill everything. But what is it when you hire the local co-op to provide that application for you?
So that's a great question, and I don't want to answer it. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, so that is a great question, right? It's who's liable at the end of the day. That's the question. Who's liable for this? I have asked that question with EPA directly multiple times. At least 4 or 5 different times. I never get a straight answer because I don't think they really know. At the end of the day, the answer that they kind of would always circle back to is that the applicator is the one that's liable, the specific applicator, because he's the one that's applying the pesticide. This is now on the label. He's, the applicator is the one responsible for the label, which therefore is going to make him responsible for this. Now, I've argued that's not always fair, right? Like you just said, in terms of a co-op where they're spraying 10,000 acres, 20,000 acres, whatever. How are they supposed to know whether that farmer had a cover crop in that field, whether they've done some of these other strategies? That gets difficult. I've argued, though, that it shouldn't necessarily always be on the farmer either, because sometimes a farmer is just there to farm and they hire an agronomist to give all the recommendations. So they don't even know what might be getting sprayed, right? The agronomist decides it, sends it to the co-op, and they spray it, and that's it. Well, so then should the agronomist be liable because they provided the recommendation? I've argued, like in Arkansas when I was down there, landowners dictated a lot of stuff. Like they would dictate you have to grow rice because we want to be able to duck hunt in the fall. And so then that limits a whole lot. Well, so then should the landowner have some liability? The conversation ended up just kind of circling around and never went anywhere. At the end of the day, it landed back on the applicator. What I'll tell you is for co-ops and retailers and things, I know at least right now I've had some conversations with Keystone, and they're trying their best to get everything figured out from their side. I fully expect at some point that the retailers and co-ops and stuff are just going to say, if you want us to spray your fields, you need to sign this contract that you have done all of these things and you have this many mitigation points, which we'll get into later, and you've checked all of this and whatever. And they're going to put the liability back on the farmer then through a contract. If it were me, that's what I would do, because I would, if I'm spraying 10,000 acres, I don't have enough time to check all of that stuff. So that's what I expect to happen. But like I said, at the end of the day, from what I've talked to, EPA, it's the applicator that is initially liable for any of this.
Well, great. Thanks. That was top of mind, so I thought I better get it out there before I forgot it.
Oh, and I see Kurt mentioned that they might hire someone to manage this part of their business. That's a possibility. I've heard a couple of them talk about doing that. But you know how the business side of things is right now. Everybody wants maximum profits as much as possible. That would be an added expense for not really benefiting too much of it either. So there might be a couple that do that. I don't know that everybody's going to do that. I would expect more people to go down the path of sign this contract that you've accomplished this stuff and remove the liability from us. But okay, is there a list of pesticide labels that this requirement is currently on or expected to be on for 2026? From Phil. No, not that I know of. There's not an official list anywhere published on this. What I can tell you though is it's really minimal. I talk about it later on. As of right now, I only know of one herbicide that's gone through the entire process. There's some that have gone through a phase of the process, which is kind of weird, but there's only one herbicide I know of that's gone through the entire thing. By the end of 2026, maybe it'll get to like 3 or 4. So, I mean, we're really on the front end of this. And that's why that's one of the things I think I would stress if I'm trying to educate on this topic. And I've tried to stress this when I've been talking about it. Like, we are dipping our toes in to try and start getting people to realize this is going to be the future, but there's really minimal things we need to be concerned about right now at this point. It's 1 to 4 herbicides at most that we need to do this full strategy thing with. But in my mind, that's kind of nice because, again, we can dip our toe in, kind of figure it out, but it's not critical because we're not going to get in trouble for all the rest of them. So it's pretty minimal right now at this point. That's what I can say. Yeah, so Tricia says Liberty Ultra. Exactly. That's the one. That is the one herbicide that has gone through the entire process is Liberty Ultra. That's it. There's no other one that's gone through the full process yet. So, and then Corteva has a current position opening for ESA specialist. Yeah. Do you know what do they have what the details are for that position? Like, I'm assuming that that's going to be a more in-depth thing within the company to try and do the regulatory stuff. All right, no worries.
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead.
On the Liberty Ultra, what type of market share? How large is that product? Do you have a general idea? Is it a lot?
It would be a complete guess. I don't know on a percentage.
Right.
So it was brand new last year, so it's a new product, right? I know that BASF is phasing out Liberty 280, so like the standard Liberty that we know of. So eventually, from BASF's standpoint, it's going to be all they have. They're not going to have the other Liberty. In my guess, though, it's probably still I don't want to say minor, but it's probably still a less percentage share because it's a brand name. It's more expensive, right? And there's plenty of generic glufosinate out there that I'm assuming people are buying because they're cheaper. So I don't know officially, but I would assume that there's not as much. I don't want to say not as much, but I would assume it's a lower percentage. Let's just say that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Got it. Okay. Thanks for the updates on the Corteva ESA. So yeah, just not sure. Just came up in a meeting. Yeah, my guess is that they're just trying to figure out the whole regulatory stuff, and it's going to be one person that's actually making sure they're satisfying all the requirements that need to be there. So, all right. Did I answer everybody's questions in that chat? That chat filled up quick. Okay.
Didn't give you a chance to get started today.
No, that's all right though. Like I said, I'm fine if this turns into a discussion instead too, because it's a convoluted topic. So, okay, hired out co-ops, yeah, the waivers, potentially hiring someone, the list of pesticides, yeah, okay. The specialist. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, if you have any other questions, like I said, feel free to raise your virtual hand and chime in or try and throw it. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat, Marty, if you help me with the chat too and just chime in or something too, that'd be great. But otherwise, I'll start going through some of my slides and we can go from there. Like I said, my goal with my slides is I want to walk you through why this Endangered Species Act stuff is going on. I'm going to try and walk you through like the three main components that are a part of this that we're going to have to start basically having documentation for. And then I'll kind of walk through that Liberty Ultra label actually, just so you can see what it looks like on an actual label and stuff like that. And I'm going to try and walk through a little bit too of the resources that are on the EPA website so that you know what those look like. And if farmers ask questions, you kind of have you've seen it, you have an idea what it looks like and that kind of stuff. So from there, let's jump into here. So Endangered Species Act, why is this happening, right? Why are we all of a sudden having to deal with all of that? Well, the short list is the Endangered Species Act was signed into law in 1973, and in effect, the EPA has relatively ignored it for about 50 years. That's why it's just coming about now in the 2020s, is the EPA relatively ignored it and didn't address it because they didn't know how to address it. And so it's just been ignored for about 50 years. But about 2011, I think, is when this first lawsuit kind of started happening. EPA started getting sued from multiple standpoints, multiple people, multiple groups, multiple different lawsuits, and they effectively got tired of getting sued. And so they decided, all right, we gotta do something. We got to address this in some form or fashion. And so that's where we've gotten to now with this whole Endangered Species Act herbicide strategy and things that came out. So this is one of the things I've had when I've talked about this. I've had a lot of pushback, from growers and retailers and everything else that, why are we having to do this now? What's going, this is impossible, blah, 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 blah. The things I tell them are, first and foremost, congrats, you had 50 years of never having to deal with this when you should have had to deal with it for 50 years. So just take that win, right? That's what I try and tell them, take that win. And then the second thing, which we'll get through later here, is this seems scary and it seems like a lot, but at the end of the day, when you boil it down, it's honestly pretty simplified now at this point, and it's just documenting. You just got to print papers out and you have papers on hand to somebody if they ever ask you about it. And really, at the end of the day, that is the baseline of this. So that's kind of how I try and quell some of those concerns and questions and things. Is like it's just finding some of this stuff, printing it off, keeping it in your records. And like I said, you've had 50 free years when we should have had to be doing this for about 50 years now. So we should feel lucky that we're just getting into it now. So that's kind of where I'm at on some of that. So what do we need to be concerned about? So here's my bullet point of 3 things. Okay, this is effectively what the Endangered Species Act is going after. There's 3 different avenues that they're concerned with. Also, the graphic here is just something that I had ChatGPT spit out. So if you're looking at that, that's what ChatGPT thinks of when you put in, give me a graphic of off-target movement of herbicides. It's a little scary to me, right? What ChatGPT just spits out with that image. But I was like, well, it covers what I'm trying to talk about, so I'm going to throw it on here. Also, it can't always spell herbicide, which is a little interesting. So, ChatGPT still not going to take our jobs away from us, I don't think. So anyway, the 3 main things, right, that this is gearing after. The first and foremost is there's going to be potentially specific area restrictions where there's a very high concern that endangered species are located or their habitats are located. See, that's the other thing where herbicides get involved with this. A lot of the times I'll talk to people and they're like, well, what endangered species is it? And I'm like, well, there's a beetle and there's a mollusk and there's whatever, right? There's all these different things. And I'm like, well, herbicides don't affect that. And I go, no, but it can affect the habitat, right? Like the grasses that the beetles feed on, or the environment, the algae or something that the mollusk is on, whatever. That's what it can affect, and therefore it would affect the species, and that's why we still have to take into account all of those different types of species, right? So it's the species, but also the habitat. So anyway, the pesticide use limitation areas, or PULAs, you're going to see that PULAs acronym everywhere, right? That is all just based on where historical data has said we believe there's these endangered species or their habitats, and we need to have special restrictions in these areas. That's where this Bulletins Live 2 website that you've heard about comes into play, because you check that website to see if your area or your fields have any added restrictions because of concerns of the species being located nearby, right? That's that point. The second bullet point that's going to be a part of endangered species stuff is basically trying to mitigate physical spray drift, right? So there's going to be label requirements for buffer zones and drift mitigation things. So, droplet size requirements, boom height requirements, wind speed, requirements, stuff like that. The physical spray drift side, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but we've kind of been doing a lot of that already for about 20 years. It's going to expand on the buffer zone side of things, but relatively speaking, there's not a lot that's changed on that avenue from what's been on labels for a long time already. So that one's not too concerning with me either, right? And then the final one is surface runoff or runoff mitigation, right? Mitigating any runoff potential. This is the one to me that's the most different, and it can be the most concerning. I'll show you later. In Indiana, I don't think we really need to be concerned about it much either. But in general, that's the one that I think requires more effort to kind of document, and it's going to be a little bit concerning maybe for a few growers that haven't updated their production practices in a long time. So that one's the one that I'd be maybe a little concerned about. But so effectively, those are the three things that we're trying to reduce and document for the Endangered Species Act. These PULAs, mitigating physical spray drift, and mitigating surface runoff. Okay, that's the three things. All right, so jumping into the first one, the PULAs. All right, so how do we go about documenting this? Well, on all new herbicide labels and on all labels that come up for re-registration, and herbicides come up for re-registration every 7 years. So it's going to be a cycle, right, as these things come up for re-registration. This language and stuff is going to be added to every single herbicide label, right? But again, it's going to be a slow process. It's not all right now. It's going to happen in this rotating basis, okay? So I would pretend, because EPA is so delayed with everything, this process is going to take 10 to 15 years before we get every herbicide through it. All right. So it's going to be this slow rollout thing, but basically we just want to start now to get in the method down for people to understand what's going on in the future. But effectively on every label, there's going to be this endangered species section that gives you some details on what's concerning, where you need to go, right? Web addresses, phone numbers you can call, emails you need to call, all that kind of stuff. Okay. Marty mentioned the plain community, right? And trying to do this. There's going to be several websites that we need to go to deal with this Endangered Species Act stuff. That can be challenging for the plain community, but on these labels, they will have a phone number. They will have an email. Email is difficult too, but the phone number, hopefully you can call to get these bulletins as well. I haven't tried. I don't know how quickly the EPA responds to some of this. So I don't know. The website's still the easiest thing. It's probably something with our plain community, either us on the extension front, or if they're working with somebody else, that they're going to try and have to provide it for the plain community. It's going to be difficult for them. I can say not difficult, but it's going to take more steps for them. Let's just say that. All right. So that being said, the labels will kind of tell you what to do, where to go, right? So yeah, it tells you right there, you need to get this bulletin. You need to obtain the bulletin no earlier than 6 months before applying the product, okay? So I like to tell everybody with this bulletins thing, do it one time for the year and you have your bases covered, right? So check it in like March, and then it's good for 6 months, and you don't have to check it again for that growing season then, right? If there's restrictions or no restrictions, whatever. No matter even if EPA adds more restrictions in there, as long as you can say, no, I checked it and I'm within my 6 months of application timings, you're good. You have a 6-month grace period, right? So basically you check it once a year and you're good. I wouldn't be checking this all the time, okay? When you go to this Bulletins Live 2 website, and I'm going to walk you through some of this, and then eventually I'll show it to you. Okay, so I'll show the example later, but I want to walk you through it first. When you first get to this Bulletins Live 2 website, there's a couple different ways that you can search for any added restrictions for pesticides. The first option is you can search by location, or there's a map and you can just kind of zoom into a specific location and see if anything pops up on the map. The second way that you can search it is by entering an EPA registration number. Now, my personal thoughts on this, the EPA registration number is dumb because then you have to do every single product separately. And it's also a number that nobody knows. I couldn't tell you what EPA registration number is for any single product. I'd have to go pull the label, look up the label on the front, and then type it in and make sure I didn't type it in wrong and then print it out and then go to the next one. It's a pain in the butt. So I recommend to everybody just do the search. And you can do like a whole county if you want. You can I did the whole state, I'll show you in a second, of Indiana. That's fine. You can do that and you can just click and see what restrictions you are and print them out and you're good. If there are no restrictions, you're fine. So that's what I would do because that to me is a whole lot more simplified and you cover your bases. Now, 5-8 years from now, when we have a whole lot more stuff that's added into Bulletins Live too, maybe that'll be more of a headache. But right now, that's what I would do. I would just do your location and walk away because it's one printout and you're done. Okay. When you actually go into this then, so this is what Bulletins Live 2 looks like. All right. And so again, I did the whole state of Indiana here. And you can see anywhere where there's pink, there is extra restrictions for some sort of pesticide. Okay. When you click on an area, it highlights it in yellow. So that's what these little areas are, highlighted in yellow. I clicked on that one just to see what it was. If you go over here on the left, then it tells you what pesticides have added restrictions that are in here. Well, in these areas that are highlighted, it's only 2 pesticides right now. Dicamba from 2020, which no longer matters because those are gone, right? Ingenia, Extendamax, Fexapan, so that's nothing. And then it's an insecticide, this cyanotranoprol, whatever. And I think that's like homeowner urban use. It's not even agricultural use, really. It's one that's not a majorly used one either. And so effectively, okay, I have the whole state of Indiana. I don't have everything highlighted, right? But if you got into your area, you pulled it up and you print that out, okay, there you go. There's what I have added restrictions on. There's nothing else there. I can apply everything else without having any concerns about pool of restrictions. Done. Right? So that's all there is to the Bulletins Live 2 thing. I can tell you for Indiana, this looks scary with all this pink. It's not scary at all. So these areas are both dicamba and this cyanotranoprol, whatever, where the yellow is right now. This whole northern part that's pink, but that's not highlighted, there's no herbicide there. It's just this cyanotranoprol thing. And then this area down here in southwestern Indiana, that goes back to the dicambas. And again, that doesn't matter because those are gone. And we don't know what that's going to look like for the next year. So effectively, we have pretty well no limitations from the Bulletins Live 2 side of things in Indiana. So all you need to do, you go pull up your area, you document that there's no things there, and you print out the bulletin. The end. Documented, done. That's it. Okay. So again, extra step, it's an inconvenience, but it's relatively simple. We don't have anything extra we need to do. Yeah, go ahead, Marty.
So that doesn't have to be field by field. You could just do like county and call it good.
Yeah, because like now again, this may change 5 years from now if we get a whole lot more stuff added into it, right? But as of right now, when there's just so few things on there, you can do it by whatever area you want, and as long as you show that there's no restrictions, then you're fine. So like, let me back up here. Like if I tried to do the whole state of Indiana, right? And I printed this bulletin off right here, well, that wouldn't necessarily work because I don't know what this is right now. I don't have this area highlighted, right? So that's not super effective. But nobody's going to do the whole state, right? You're going to narrow it down to like where your farm is. And even if it's a whole county, like you're still fine. Because again, this whole area in here is all just one thing. So you go into that one county, print it out, boom, you're fine too. Okay, and that satisfies the requirement. You just need to show that there's no restrictions there.
That is good to know.
Yes. And so again, now I recommend that for right now when we have very few things on there. When we get down the line, then that might turn into chaos because then you might have 50 products that all pop up and, oh, okay, I don't want to deal with that anymore. Now I got to be a little bit more precise on what I'm selecting. But as far as right now, for the next couple, 2, 3, 4 years, like this would be the way I would do it, and it simplifies it a great deal. Yeah.
Understood. Thank you.
So then the next step of this, so you do pull this up on the website. You'll notice this little green button over here that says printable bulletin. That's what we need to print out and keep for record keeping. So you'll print that. It'll spit out a PDF document. What that PDF document looks like is this. I took just kind of a couple screenshots of a couple pieces of it. So it'll spit out the map of your area, right? And where there was limitation areas and things like that. It'll tell you a few details about it. As you go down into the bulletin, it'll tell you the specific chemistries and things, right, that are of concern. What their use is, their method, all that kind of stuff. Then as you go down to the bottom of that bulletin, it'll tell you what the extra restrictions are that you need to follow. So this is the extra restrictions for dicamba, right, that had occurred. Now, again, this doesn't apply because we don't have these products, but previously when we had those new dicamba products, this was the thing, was you had to have some extra buffer zones. And that was it. It didn't ban it. It's just you need to have some extra buffer zones in these areas. Okay? That was it. So you document it, you say you followed those directions, and that's the end of this PULA thing. The other thing I like to point out that's a little bit confusing, I've had a couple retailers ask me on this. When you go into Bulletins Live 2, you have to select an application month, and it'll spit that application month out at the top. So this says June 2026, right? Well, I just told you a little bit ago that this is good for that 6-month time window, right? So it's a little confusing. Is this only good for June, or is it good for 6 months? It's good for 6 months. You're supposed to have like an intended application date, but they're not going to hold you to that. So the real important thing is if you go down here at the bottom, it'll say date printed in real small text, but it'll say date printed 1/6/2026 and a time. And as long as you're within 6 months of that date, then you're fine. And I've talked to the state chemist office, Nate Davis, and he said the same thing, that that's what they're going to go off of, is they're going to look at that date printed, and as long as you're within the 6-month window, you've checked the box, you're fine. Okay. All right. Hopefully nobody's looking like Brett Bielema and confused as all get out right now in the fourth quarter. Right? Are we all good on the PULAs front? Any questions on that one?
Don't see anything in the chat, so I think we're good.
All right. Perfect. I'll go on to the next one then. I'm running long. I probably need to speed up a little bit. But all right, so the next one, physical spray drift. This is easier. I can speed through this one a little bit. So again, we already talked about there's going to be label requirements for buffer zones and drift mitigation. But again, relatively speaking, we've already had this on labels for 20 years or so, with droplet size requirements and wind speed requirements and buffer zone potential. It's just buffer zones are going to be more common, but other than that, nothing else really changes on this front. So it doesn't worry me too much. You basically just, again, got to document what you're doing. So again, not much is different. Droplet size, wind speed, other common strategies, that kind of thing. The buffer zones will be more commonplace, though, for herbicides, and they can range anywhere from 10 to 400 feet downwind, which may be possible. So 400 feet buffer zone, that's a little bit concerning. But the plus side is the EPA has built in some reduction strategy things that you can reduce that buffer zone if you do certain things, right? If you have a hooded sprayer, if you use a coarser droplet size, if you add a drift reducing adjuvant, if you lower your boom height, blah, 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 blah. If you do all these things, you can start adding them all up and reducing that buffer zone by a certain percentage. So they're even trying to help you reduce those buffer zones as well. Also, a lot of areas count in this buffer zone, which will help us out a lot across the state. So this is directly from the EPA website, that buffer areas can include any of these areas that are adjacent or contiguous to the treated field. So if you have another agricultural field that's right next door to the field you're treating, that counts as this buffer zone, right? So if you have another, ag field right next to you at 200 feet, it doesn't matter because you're going into that ag field. Roads and graveled surfaces and all that stuff counts into this. Buildings, all of these different things, CRP ground, even irrigation stuff, if they're kind of contained, all of that can count into this buffer zone. So it's not like you have to have the 10 to 400 feet all the time, regardless of what's next to you. A lot of this other stuff still counts into the buffer zones, and so most people probably won't even really be affected right? It's a lot of this stuff is already going to be factored in there, and their buffer zone is going to be taken care of for them. And again, I mentioned that there's different drift reduction options that if you don't qualify for some of those things and you need to have this buffer, well, there's ways that you can knock it down. So this again is pulled directly from the EPA website. There's different tables that can help you. So you can see here, if you have a really small field, right? So if you're only spraying less than 1.5 acres, you can automatically reduce your downwind drift buffer zone by 75%. If you have a 4 to 10 acre field, you can reduce it by 15%. If you use a downwind drift barrier, like if you have hedgerows or something else, that reduces your buffer zone requirement. Different sprayer things. I mean, there's a whole list again, right? So they're trying to help out and make these buffer zone requirements pretty feasible as well. Okay. All right. So that's all I was going to talk on the physical spray drift side of things, because again, it's not really changing much from what we already have. Are there any questions on that front? All right. Quick joke, right? This is the list of people I trust spraying my fields, okay? Especially with all the extra stuff. Next thing. So we've talked about the PULAs now. We've talked about the physical spray drift. That's 2 of the things for Endangered Species Act. The third is this surface runoff or the runoff mitigation stuff. And this is the one that gets to me a little bit more intensive. And we got to document a few more things, okay? Basically, in effect, what EPA has done has created a game that you get to play. That's the way I sell it. It's like Monopoly. It's not a good sales pitch, but it is what it is, okay? So effectively, every herbicide label will have a certain number of points that you need to achieve to legally apply it, okay? And then different strategies and different tactics and all of these things will give you points that will add up so that you can say, yep, I've done this list of things. This gives me this number of points. I legally can apply this product because I've went over that threshold of points that I needed. Okay, hopefully that makes sense. I'm going to walk through it here, but that's effectively what it's doing. You need this number of points to apply the product. I can do all of this list of different things to get enough points to legally apply this product, to mitigate runoff mitigation and legally apply it. Okay, that's what this one is aimed at. So there is, again, the EPA website for this mitigation menu that you can go to. And I'm going to go to this website in a second, just to show you what it looks like. But it has a whole table that lists everything out. Again, what gives you points. So here's just some examples over here on the side. Counties actually are given across the whole country. Certain counties are given a certain number of points just based on their average geography. Okay, I'll show you here. Indiana actually did really well on the county-based thing. I think almost every single county in the state got at least 2 points automatically for this runoff mitigation just based on their geography. Some got 3. I think there's only one county that got 0. It was Martin County down south. They got 0 points. But every other county got at least 2 automatically given to them. Okay, and the herbicides will have a scale of either you need to get to 3 or 9 points to legally apply it. So we're already given 2 to 3, like that's a pretty good sign, right? But some other things that you can do if your field slope, so this gets more into, Marty, you asked before about PULAs in the areas, right? The PULAs can be broad scale, large areas that you're covering. This runoff mitigation part is going to be a field by field basis. You need to do this for every single field. Okay. But so when you start doing this, if the field slope in that individual field is less than or equal to 3%, you get another 2 points. If you track your mitigation points, so if you're just doing what you're supposed to be doing and tracking this stuff, you get a point. I think if you hire an agronomist or a specialist or something, that's another point. So there's a whole bunch of options to get these points to legally apply products to. Okay. So again, that's kind of my sales pitch to the growers and the folks that are trying to do this is like, listen, again, it's extra documentation. It's an extra step we need to take. But at the end of the day, the EPA actually was kind of looking out for us, and they gave us all kinds of options to make sure that we can still legally apply stuff. Okay. Which it could have been a whole lot worse. I'll tell you, 2 years ago when this first came out, I never thought we would legally apply a herbicide again. I thought we were doomed. So this is way better than what it used to be. We can at least now check off the boxes in my book. It's an extra step. We got to spend a little bit of extra time in the spring to document this stuff. Okay. All right. Just a few other examples that are on this mitigation list. Vegetative filter strips, grass waterways, field borders. If you're irrigation, if you have some sort of irrigation water management system, contour farming, strip cropping, tillage or no-till, different things there. Like there is a whole list of options to try and satisfy these requirements. Okay. Here's the list of the points that every county in Indiana automatically got. I'll let this sit here for a second, but so you can pick out your county and see. Like I mentioned, though, almost every single county in Indiana got at least 2 points. Some did get three. Like I know here in Tippecanoe, we got three. Marty, you and White got three, right? The only one that didn't get two was Martin. Martin County is the only one that didn't get at least two. They got zero. So they have a little bit more work to do if they're going to apply some stuff. But otherwise, automatically, here's a number of points for us to try and do this mitigation thing. All right. So now I'm going to try and walk through the website real quick so you can see it. Like I've given you screenshots and stuff, but I want to show you the website and what this looks like. This is the website I would direct almost everybody to. It has all the information basically in one stop. And it's actually set up not too bad, especially for a government website. It's set up pretty good to navigate. So let me pull this up quick. All right, can everybody still see that? Can you see the website?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So this is what the website looks like on EPA, right? So it's mitigation menu. You've got different options. You can click here. The first top part of this web page is the runoff part that we were just talking about. So that third step, and it guides you through. It gives you different steps to follow to document and achieve these points. The main thing I like to tell people is you come down here and boom, here's these tables where it literally gives you everything that you can possibly do and the number of points you can achieve then by doing these different practices, right? I mean, there's this huge table in here to do that, okay? The other cool thing that they've done is there is a pesticide app to help people on a mobile app, or you can do it on a desktop, but it'll walk you through some of this. So it's a little calculator. You can get started. You type in some information and you start checking boxes. Do I do this? Do I do that? Do I not do this on that field? Whatever. And it'll walk you all the way through and tell you how many points you have in that field.
Is that the Palm?
That's the Palm. Yes. So it's a pesticide app for, I don't remember now what the heck. Come back to this mitigation. Pesticide app for label mitigations. Palm. Okay. But that app is pretty slick. It'll walk you all through that. The other thing that's pretty nice too is they actually have an Excel spreadsheet that has all of this built in if you want to run it in Excel instead, and you just kind of, again, check boxes. So I have here, I did an example last night. This is what the Excel spreadsheet looks like. And you literally just come in and you select for these different things, right? So is the farm field contains only managed areas? Is it an agricultural field? Yes. Okay, well, I need to do my mitigation measures, right? I need to get some points. So then you just start coming down here and you start making selections, or if you don't make a selection, you're not going to get points. But do I have a system that captures runoff and discharge? I'm going to say, no, I do not, right? Or not applicable. So 0 points there. Am I tracking my mitigation points though? Yes. Boom, I got a point. Oh, you put in your state and your county and it tells you your number of points. I told you Tippecanoe gets 3 points, right? Are you following recommendations from a runoff erosion specialist? Right? Working with a specialist, 1 point. Is my field less than 3% slope? No, 0 points. I'm not predominantly sandy, so no. You walk down here. Okay, tillage. I'm running reduced till. Boom, I get 2 points for that. I have a long-term cover crop that I'm growing. And if you ever have a question, well, what does a long-term cover crop mean? Okay, what's that? Well, I don't know what that means, long-term. They have hyperlinks and they have every single thing defined so you can understand what every one of those are. So here's a short duration cover crop is a cover crop planted in the spring. A long-term duration cover crop is one that's planted in the fall and overwinters. Oh, easy. Okay, I know what my short-term and my long-term cover crop is, and I can select it and get my points based on that. Okay, so again, I put a long-term cover crop, boom, 3 points. A lot of this other stuff, I just said no. Grass waterway. I had a grass waterway in the field. Boom, that's another 2 points. And then if you scroll down here, Eventually it'll tell you, okay, well, how many total mitigation points do you have for that field? I got 13 in this field that I'd made up. And the only things I said I did, right, was I said I had a grass waterway, said I was reduced till, and I used a long-term cover crop, basically. And I'm in Tippecanoe County, Indiana. Boom, 13 points. And I told you the scale is going to be, between 3 and 9. Done, documented. And none of this is basically going to change year in and year out, right? Like the first year, this is going to be terrible because you got to do every single field. But after you do it for a year or two, you're going to know, basically in that field, I know I have 13 points year in and year out because I'm not ripping out a grass waterway every year. And if I'm no-till, I'm no-till, right? And if I'm using cover crops, more than likely I'm trying to do that just about every year. So really your points aren't going to change a whole lot. So again, extra steps, got to walk through it, but it is really honestly feasible when you've walked through this part. Okay. So that's what the Excel spreadsheet looks like. The other thing on this Excel spreadsheet, the same can be done. That's the runoff part. If we take a step back to bullet point 2, the physical spray drift, they've actually also developed an Excel spreadsheet to figure out your buffer zone reductions. I told you can reduce that buffer zone. There's a spreadsheet for that. That Palm app that was online, you can also go through that and it'll tell you your buffer zone reduction requirements. Or you can also go, if you go further down this EPA webpage, so we were on the runoff part, if you come down beneath the tables of runoff, you get into the buffer zone part. Okay, and then it'll give you the whole step-by-step process for the buffer zone part. It'll again tell you, here's the Palm, here's the Excel spreadsheet, and here's the tables if you just want to follow the tables on the website to do the buffer zone reductions as well. Okay, so again, it's actually really designed they tried to make this as user-friendly as possible. None of this process was going to be user-friendly from the start, but man, this is about as good as I could ask for trying to follow some of this, right?
They didn't put this together overnight, did they?
No, there was a lot of work that went in this. Like I said, this has been going on in the background for actually, it's more than 2 years now. It's like 3 or 4 years because I was dealing with this on the initial stages when I was in Arkansas, and I've been here at Purdue now for 2 years. So it's been in the works for like 3 or 4 years, all of this stuff going into this, right? So it's been a while. The other quick thing, so I told you the mitigation menu, this is where I would direct people to this website right up here because everything's here. Because the other thing that you can go to is helpful links is on the side, and you can get your bulletins live too. Easy too, right? You don't have to remember a second website. If you remember this one website, boom, I just need to click on my bulletins live too. And then as this pulls up, here's that website to check off that first bullet point, that PULA, right? And again, over here on the left is where you can search either by location, the application month, or the registration number. Otherwise, if you just want to zoom into an area, you can just zoom into a specific spot, right, in Indiana. I'm just going to kind of zoom in here, say to somewhere right in here is the TPAC farm that I'm trying to find. 800, right down here. So the TPAC farm is right here, right? So I'm going to zoom out a little bit there. I know the whole TPAC farm is located in here, right? Okay. I click on that right there. I just click into it. And it is a little clunky, I will admit. Like the Bulletins Live 2 website's the worst part of it. But you've got to kind of finesse it a little bit. You click on it. This whole map, the only thing that's on it, like I mentioned before, is that cyanotranoprol or whatever, right? Brings it up over here. Okay, I'm done. I just print my bulletin and I've documented for the next 6 months that this is the only thing I have a restriction on. Done. Okay. So that's what the website looks like. That's where you can navigate on that whole end. Hopefully nobody's confused screaming, right? Is everything clear so far as to how I've walked you through this? Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Do you have more questions?
Tommy, this has been super helpful, but I do have one question.
Yes, go ahead.
When you're doing the surface runoff, looking at the table or doing it on the Excel, you said that it's nice to have that maybe Excel that for the next year if you don't do too many changes, but you still need to do that every year and show proof that you did that year. And how can you show proof that you did that year? Does that make sense?
Yeah. That's a great question. That gets into the enforcement side of things, right? Like, how are they going to verify that you've done the things that you said you've done?
So
They
there's
don't
no,
know.
that's
They,
unclear. Just do it for the sake of doing it. But if you do have that spreadsheet, like it'd be nice to say, oh, nothing's really changed. And you just, okay,
right. And so that's what I'm getting at. Is basically the point that you're making there, and this is what I'll say is, relatively speaking, it's an honor system from that aspect.
okay,
And it's just gonna, so what I would say is, if the state chemist office comes out, right, you get a complaint, and they're not going to be trying to enforce this, like they're not going to come do checks. It's going to be, if you got a complaint called on you and then they come out to your farm, then you better have all of this there that you can just hand over to them. Well, again, I would basically just say, if you've done it once and you know it hasn't changed, I don't think
good
that it
enough.
prints out a date on it, right? Or maybe I guess you could insert the date at the top. But again, every year, if you know it's not changed, you just go in, change the date, and print it out again. Done.
Makes sense.
And then you hand it over. So yeah, that's the extent of it from that
Okay.
standpoint. It's a good question, but yeah, it's just kind of an honor system at that point that you've done these things you said you were doing.
This really helps because I'm teaching this next week and I was kind of nervous. So thank you again for doing this.
No worries. I'm glad it's helpful.
Can I add on to Lisa's question though?
No, you're not allowed, Tricia.
Okay. Well, so I guess like how often will the mitigation Excel sheet or like app change? Like, will they send out updates that like, hey, we no longer, because like I was saying, like if a farmer keeps the same Excel sheet every year and like it's changed, like I think that's where like the farmer should be saving or re-downloading the Excel sheet and re-saving them for every field each year because that's a lot.
That's a great question. That's a very good question. As far as I know, okay, this is what I've been told, and this is my understanding, is that those will not, what I'll say, change, right? So what they have on there now, like the different categories we talked about and the points assigned to them will not change. The only thing that will change from year to year is potentially when more data comes in and more things, stuff might get added to it that gives you more options to achieve points, right? So maybe some growers will need that if they're really strapped for trying to get certain points. But like in my instance, right, where I already had 13, if I don't care because I know I already got 13, then it really wouldn't matter to have to download like the new versions if they come out with new versions and stuff. I doubt that they're going to update that very frequently. Like this is based on a whole lot of data that's already went into it. And again, we talked about this has been at least 4 to 5 years in the making. So I don't even think this is going to be like an annual thing, right? It's going to be maybe after 5 years, somebody sends in a whole bunch of data. Okay, we got to update a couple little things, and that'll be it. But I don't see the Excel spreadsheet or that list changing a whole lot, other than maybe something gets added to the list. But I don't see anything getting taken away or points changing or anything like that. Does that make sense? Does that answer the question?
Yeah, I think that's helpful because then that way,
Okay.
then the farmer doesn't have to resave it and recheck
Right.
every field every year if they're well within like a 13-point range and they only needed 5 points.
Exactly. Yes. And maybe it's a good sales pitch when we're doing the education, like, hey, yeah, maybe go download a new one every few years or something. But yeah, definitely not like an every year thing. I don't think they have to. So, okay. Uh, let's see. Okay, no other questions right now? Okay. So real quick, the last thing I want to do, I know I'm running short of time, is I just wanted to show you what the label looks like. So like if a grower's looking at this or you're looking at this or retailer, whatever, you know what some of this stuff looks like on the actual label and where it's directing you and where to understand where some of this is coming from. So like we mentioned, Liberty Ultra is the only herbicide that's gone through all of this. There are some other herbicides that have the Bulletins Live 2 and the Pula thing on their label, but they don't have the runoff mitigation stuff. So Enlist 1 is actually one of those examples. Enlist 1 has had the Endangered Species Act section and the Bulletins Live 2 thing on it since it came out 5 or 6 years ago. But it hasn't done the runoff mitigation part. So you don't have runoff mitigation points for Enlist 1. It just has the Pula thing that you're supposed to check. Okay, so there are some like that, but Liberty Ultra is the only one I know of that has gone through this entire process and has mitigation points, physical drift, buffer zones, and the Pula thing. Okay, so when you look at Liberty Ultra's label, the first thing I was going to highlight is here's that EPA registration number that if you're going to search by that on the Bulletins Live 2, the Pula, that's the number you would type in. Like I said, no one knows those numbers. Like EPA doesn't even remember those numbers. So you'd have to pull up every label, type it in, make sure you didn't type it in wrong. And then you have to do that for every single herbicide that you're doing because every single herbicide has a different registration number. So that sounds like chaos to me. That's why I don't recommend that. I just do the area search. When you look at the label, if you go to section 12, here's the endangered and threatened species section that I talked about initially, where it tells you, you have to get your bulletins. So you have to go to Bulletins Live 2. Here's the website, blah, 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 blah. You can also call this number. You can email this, etc. Right? Just gives you the little brief breakdown on the endangered species stuff. The next section, I'm actually bouncing around in the label, just so you know, if you look at the section numbers, this was section 12. Now I bounce back to section 9. Labels are atrocious for trying to follow them correctly. But anyway, section 9, here's the mandatory spray buffer part, so the physical spray drift part. For aerial side, you need to use at least a medium spray droplet, and it's a 50-foot buffer. If you're on the ground, you need a medium to coarser spray droplet size, and it's a 10-foot buffer. But again, you can go through all of these different things, satisfy the requirements as buffers, and you can also go through the reduction strategy thing and reduce it down to 0 probably just by either using a bigger droplet size or a drift reduction adjuvant or something else. Okay, so that's that part. And then the last thing is if you jump to section 11, then it's a mandatory runoff mitigation section, and it walks through the main thing that when you get to this section is you need to know how many points you need to get. So Liberty Ultra, you need to get a minimum of 3 points, right? And then it also tells you again about Bulletins Live 2 within 6 months of application. So the runoff mitigation, the 3 points, it gives you a few examples here, but otherwise you do the calculator, you try and get your 3 points. In Indiana, again, this is simple because almost every county was given 2. Some were automatically given all 3. If you're in a county that got 2 and you check the box that I'm tracking my mitigation points, I have all 3. I'm done. I don't need to do literally anything else to get my 3 points to legally apply this product, right? So that's what that looks like on the label and where you need to find that. So real quick, just the conclusions from this. The basic principle of the Endangered Species Act is just that it's going to require more documentation, right? And then with the runoff side of things, if it's a grower that just hasn't really updated practices in quite a few years, maybe they have to make some, production changes if we get to a herbicide that requires like 9 mitigation points, right? Like atrazine. Atrazine is going to be the scary one because that one's going, I can tell you right now, that's going to need 9 mitigation runoff points because everybody's concerned with atrazine, right, in water. And so that one in certain areas, if you just haven't done other things like we were walking through there, that would be the one that might be difficult to get to your mitigation points, and some farmers will have to change some practices, right? But in general, for most stuff, I doubt farmers are really going to even have to change anything and they're going to get their points. They just need to document it, okay? So again, it's inconvenient, but it's definitely not impossible. It's a drastic improvement from 3 to 4 years ago when this first came out. It'll be a slow, gradual increase. Again, this year it's like one, maybe a couple other herbicides that potentially will get registered this year that'll have it, but it's very few that have the full scale system involved. So it's a good year just to dip our toe into compliance and make sure to get people to start doing it kind of thing. Herbicides are not alone. That's the other thing to know with this. So herbicides were first. We drew the short end of the stick. But insecticides have their strategy that is basically in the final stages now, and then they're moving to fungicides. So about 2 years from now, fungicides will have their strategy out that'll have to follow through with a bunch of this stuff too. So everybody's going to go through it. Herbicides was just the first one to go through it. And then finally, my soapbox pitch, this is what I kind of end all my presentations with when I'm talking to growers and stuff, is just do your best when it comes to this, okay? It's a lot. Everybody's learning, even the Indiana State Chemist Office is learning how to deal with this from an enforcement side. So we're all in the learning phase, right? We're in kindergarten when it comes to this. So I just try and tell everybody, just do your best. Acknowledge that this is going on. Acknowledge that we got to go to these couple websites, print it off, just try and get the documentation that we can. and we're just going to go forward with it, right? That's going to look a whole lot better if you ever get called on a complaint, state chemist office comes out. If you at least say, hey, I've checked this website, I think I did this right. Here's all my details. That's going to look a whole lot better than if we just say, nah, screw this. I'm not doing any of this. Because if we say that, the next step is not more regulations. It's going to be that they pull labels completely and we don't have products at all. They're just going to pull them, especially like we just mentioned, atrazine and glyphosate. Those things are always in the crosshairs for everything. If we don't at least show that we're trying on this, they're just going to be like, nah, screw this. Those are gone, right? We're just taking them. And so that's my soapbox pitch to everybody is just show that you're trying, right? Again, it's inconvenient, but we can do it. It's just the few extra steps. Just show that we're trying. That's my sales pitch to everybody on it. So with that, real quick, just big thank you to the Purdue Weed Science team. I always got to throw that in here, that they do so much work to help us be able to talk about some of this stuff. Thanks to all of our supporters for helping us do some of this research, do these presentations, all that kind of stuff. Also, my PBS sales pitch for the day is thank you to viewers like you. Yeah. And then finally, here's just contact info. If you have any more questions, follow-up stuff, please feel free to get a hold of me at my phone, my email, that kind of stuff. So let's see. Any last-minute questions before we get kicked off?
You see,
Go ahead, Marty.
Lace said these PowerPoints are very useful. Can you share them with us to show more details of what we can share generally?
Yes, I don't think I have a problem with anything on those slides. So yeah, I should be able to share them. I'll get them to like Marty or Brianna or Jeff or all of them and get them to send them out just so nobody gets missed. But yeah, I'll go through it later today and make sure there's nothing in there that I'm real concerned about. But I think most of that should be should be just good because it's just stuff I pulled from the website and the labels. So yeah.
Tommy, I'll also be editing this Zoom call and we'll be sending it out, so I could probably send out both at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, no, that sounds good. I see one other question was about general use products in the future. What are your thoughts on reaching folks that will never attend a PARP? No idea. So I tried searching that a little bit because I know Jeff brought that to my attention yesterday. I can't find any information on this applying to general use products and how that's ever going to be enforceable or how they're going to go about that. I'm not sure. That's a whole nother. They haven't figured all of that out yet because they definitely haven't figured how this applies to like turf grass applications either. So like this doesn't apply to the turf environment right now. This doesn't apply even to like pasture applications right now. I don't think it's strictly basically row crop environment that this applies to. And so all of those things will be a future problem, I guess is what I would say, because they need to finesse a lot of this stuff to be applicable to those other environments. And so I don't know how they're going to try and apply that in the future. That would be what I would say.
When's the atrazine label renew go on, Tommy?
Sorry, Kurt, say that again.
When's the atrazine label renew come up?
It's been ongoing for about 3 years right now. They kind of keep kicking the can down the road a little bit on it. So atrazine is always a hold your breath every year on what they're going to do with it. So that's what I would say on that one. Is it could come at any time. They're constantly making tweaks to it, like proposal tweaks, like not anything official because we have official label, right? But every year I get an update on, well, now we're going to maybe tweak this on the label and this with the endangered species and that stuff. And it just kind of keeps getting delayed. But yeah, it's been in the ongoing process for at least 3 or 4 years now, I think, for its review. All right. Any other final questions for me?
Actually, I'm going to correct what I said earlier because so many of us have these PARPs coming up almost immediately, like tomorrow, Monday. So as soon as you get that out, we'll try to get that sent immediately.
No, that sounds good. I've got a couple other meetings I've got like this morning and stuff, but hopefully this afternoon I'll get it sent to y'all that you can send it out to everybody. So
yeah, it'll take. I've got the same thing. It'll take me a little while to get this edited.
Okay. All right. Well, sounds good. Well, thank you, everybody. I Yeah, no worries. I get bored if I'm the humor part. I get bored if I'm just talking, random, especially regulations. Good night. I needed some humor in there too, just to keep me awake. But anyway, I appreciate y'all. Like I said, hopefully it's helpful. If you have questions when you're trying to do this topic, feel free to hit me up. Also, I'll just throw his name into. I know I've talked to Nathan Davis on this a little bit as well. And he's of the same mindset, like reach out to him with questions. And he is of the same mindset from the state chemist office. We're just trying to get people aware of this and get them to start understanding that this is a concept, right? It's not going to be let's go full bore compliance right now. It's just let's get it in front of them and let's start them thinking about it for moving down the line. So he's on board with basically everything we talked about today as well. So
Tommy, on behalf of all of us, thank you. This has
Yeah.
been very helpful.
good. I'm glad. Like I said, that's good to hear. So if y'all need anything, feel free to get a hold of me.